Chapter 1. The Unwanted Offering. The castle's great hall smelled of iron and incense, and Isolde stood at its center like a lamb on an altar. She did not belong here. Not among the high-born vampires who watched her with gleaming eyes and cold amusement, not in the shadow of the throne where he sat, King Thaddeus, the giant who ruled the northern coven with a silence more terrible than any roar. Her hands trembled against the coarse fabric of her servant's dress. She had scrubbed floors in the human quarter for 6 years, invisible and unremarkable, until the morning the coven's emissaries arrived and dragged her here without explanation. "She carries no noble blood," one of the council members sneered, his voice echoing off vaulted ceilings. "She is a maid. This is an insult to our king." Isolde kept her gaze on the stone floor. She had learned long ago that invisibility was survival. "The debt must be paid," another voice countered. "Her village owes tribute. A bride was promised." A bride. The word twisted in her stomach. She had heard whispers of the treaty, how the human settlements paid their protection tax in gold, grain, and occasionally blood. But never had she imagined they would offer her. The girl no one wanted. The orphan with no family, no dowry, no worth. "Speak, mortal." The voice came from the throne, deep and cold as a winter grave. Isolde's head snapped up despite herself. King Thaddeus was not merely tall, he was colossal, a figure carved from shadow and stone. His shoulders were broad enough to block out the firelight behind him, his frame wrapped in black velvet and steel. Long dark hair fell past his collar, framing a face of brutal, ancient beauty. High cheekbones, a mouth set in a permanent line of displeasure, and eyes, God's, his eyes, silver and fathomless, fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. "What is your name?" he asked. "Isolde, your majesty." Her voice was barely a whisper. He did not move, did not blink. For a long, terrible moment she thought he might simply order her removed, sent back to the village to whatever punishment awaited a failed offering. Then he spoke again, and the hall fell silent. "The girl stays." Shock rippled through the chamber. The counselors exchanged glances, their protests rising like a swarm. "My lord, she is beneath. She is human. She cannot possibly." Silence. One word. That was all it took. The giant king rose from his throne, and the room seemed to shrink around him. He descended the dais with slow, measured steps, each footfall echoing like a death knell. Isolde's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to run, wanted to disappear into the walls as she had done all her life, but his gaze pinned her in place, silver and unyielding. He stopped 3 paces away, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of night air and something darker, something old. "You will serve as my consort," he said, his voice low and absolute. "You will live in this castle. You will want for nothing." It was not a proposal, it was a decree. Isolde's throat closed. I don't understand, my lord." "You do not need to." He turned away, his cloak sweeping behind him like a shadow given weight. The audience was over. The council stood frozen, disbelief etched on their pale faces. But as King Thaddeus reached the archway, he paused, did not look back, simply spoke into the silence. "See that she is given chambers in the east wing. No one is to disturb her without my permission." And then he was gone. Isolde's new room was larger than the entire servants' quarters she had shared with 9 other girls. The bed alone could have fit 4 people. Velvet curtains framed windows that overlooked a moonlit forest. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting gold across polished wood and stone. She stood in the center of it all, numb. A servant, an actual vampire servant, pale and elegant in silver livery, had brought her here, bowed stiffly, and left without a word. No explanation, no instruction. Isolde sank onto the edge of the bed, her legs finally giving out. You will serve as my consort. The words made no sense. She was nothing. A maid. A girl who had spent her life on her knees scrubbing other people's filth. What could a vampire king possibly want with her? And yet, beneath the fear, beneath the confusion, something else stirred. The way he had looked at her. As if he saw her. Not through her, not past her, but at her, with a focus that burned. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to slow her racing heart. Outside, the wind howled against the castle walls. Somewhere deep in the stone corridors, she heard the distant sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate. Isolde lay back on the bed, staring up at the canopy overhead. She did not sleep. She could still feel those silver eyes on her skin. Chapter 2. The Silent King's Shadow. 3 days passed in eerie stillness. Isolde saw no one. Meals appeared outside her door. Rich food she barely touched. Wine she did not drink. The castle was a labyrinth of empty corridors and flickering torches, and she was a ghost within it. The king did not summon her. No one explained her purpose. She was simply kept. On the 4th night, restlessness drove her from her chamber. She told herself she only wanted to walk, to feel less like a prisoner. But her feet carried her deeper into the castle, down staircases she did not recognize, through halls lined with portraits of stern, beautiful faces. She found herself in a library. It was vast. 3 stories of shelves carved into the stone itself, books stacked floor to ceiling. Moonlight poured through stained glass windows, painting the floor in shades of crimson and violet. The air smelled of old parchment and something faintly sweet. Isolde wandered between the shelves, trailing her fingers along leather spines. Here, at least, she felt less adrift. Books did not judge, did not demand. You read? The voice came from the shadows near the fireplace. Isolde spun, her heart leaping into her throat. King Thaddeus sat in a high-backed chair, a book resting open on his knee. He wore no armor tonight, only a simple black shirt and trousers, his long hair unbound. He looked almost mortal, if not for the unnatural stillness of his posture, the way the firelight refused to touch his eyes. Yes, my lord. She dropped into a clumsy curtsy. Forgive me. I did not know you were here. I'll leave. Stay. She froze. He closed the book with a soft thud, setting it aside. For a long moment, he simply studied her, his expression unreadable. You have not eaten, he said finally. I'm not very hungry, my lord. You are afraid. It was not a question. Isolde lowered her gaze. I don't understand why I'm here. No, he agreed quietly. You would not. Silence stretched between them. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled. Come here. Her pulse stuttered, but she obeyed, crossing the space between them on unsteady legs. He did not rise, did not move, simply watched her approach with that same unnerving focus. When she stood before him, close enough to feel the cold radiating from his body, he tilted his head slightly. Give me your hand. Isolde hesitated. Then, slowly, she extended her right hand. His fingers closed around hers, gentle, shockingly so, but cold as winter iron. His palm dwarfed hers entirely. He turned her hand over, studying it as if it held some secret text. You have calluses, he murmured. From work. Yes. My lord? You were not raised gently. No, my lord. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a feather-light touch that sent a strange shiver through her. And yet you do not demand to know your fate. You do not plead. You do not weep. Isolde swallowed. Would it matter if I did? Something flickered in his silver eyes, almost like approval. No, he said. It would not. He released her hand. The cold absence of his touch felt like a brand. You may go. Isolde stepped back, her mind spinning, but at the doorway she paused. My lord? Yes. Why did you choose me? For the first time, she saw something shift in his expression, a tightening at the corners of his mouth, a shadow that passed behind his eyes. Because, he said softly, you were already invisible. Chapter 3. The Bloodstones Whisper. The nightmares began on the 5th night. Isolde woke gasping, her nightgown soaked with sweat, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. The dream was already fading, fragments of red stone, a woman's scream, hands covered in blood. But the terror remained, clinging to her skin like frost. She pressed her palms to her face, trying to steady her breathing. A knock sounded at her door. Come in, she whispered, her voice raw. The door opened and a vampire servant entered, the same one who had first escorted her. Her expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes lingered on Isolde with something that might have been pity. His Majesty requests your presence, she said, in the throne room. Isolde's stomach dropped. Now? Now. The throne room was colder than she remembered. Torches burned low in their sconces, casting the space in half-light. King Thaddeus stood before the throne, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. He did not turn when she entered. You dreamed, he said. Isolde stopped in her tracks. How did you? I felt it. His voice was quiet, edged with something she could not name. Through the stone. The stone? He turned then, and she saw it, hanging from a silver chain around his neck, resting against his chest. A deep crimson gem, the size of a robin's egg, pulsing faintly with inner light. A bloodstone, he said. Bound to the Coven's line for 1,000 years, it awakens only in the presence of certain bloodlines. Isolde's breath caught. I don't understand. Neither did I. He descended the dais, his massive form cutting through the shadows. Until you arrived. He stopped before her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. The stone has been dormant for 3 centuries, he continued. No bride, no consort, no mortal has stirred it. And then the council brought you. His eyes searched hers, silver and intent. A maid, an orphan, a girl with no family, no history. I have no magic, Isolde said quickly. I'm nothing. You are not nothing. The words were soft, absolute. He reached up, lifting the bloodstone from his chest. It pulsed brighter, casting red light across his face. Hold out your hand. Isolde obeyed, her hand trembling. He placed the stone in her palm. The world exploded. Light. Heat. A rush of images. Castles burning. A woman with Isolde's eyes standing in a circle of fire, blood dripping onto ancient stone. A voice chanting in a language she did not know but somehow understood. She gasped, stumbling back. The stone fell from her hand, and King Thaddeus caught it before it hit the floor. The vision stopped. Isolde collapsed to her knees, shaking violently. What was that? The king knelt before her, his face level with hers. For the first time, she saw something raw in his expression, something almost like fear. You carry the blood of the first line, he said quietly. The witches who created my kind. The ones who vanished 500 years ago. Isolde shook her head, tears burning her eyes. That's impossible. I'm no one. I've always been no one. You were hidden, he corrected. For a reason. His hand lifted, hovering near her face but not quite touching. And now, he murmured, you are the most dangerous woman in my kingdom. Chapter 4. The King's Confession. Isolde did not return to her chambers that night. King Thaddeus led her instead to a private study, smaller than the library, lined with maps and ancient texts. He poured her wine she did not drink and stood by the window, staring out at the darkened forest. The first line, He began, his voice low and distant. We're mortals who discovered the ritual of immortality. They created the first vampires as guardians, protectors. But over time, we became something else. Monsters, Isolde whispered. Yes. He did not flinch from the word. The witches tried to undo what they had made. A war began. Most of them were slaughtered. The survivors went into hiding, scattering their bloodlines across the mortal world. He turned to face her. The bloodstone was forged to find them, to identify the last of their line. For centuries, it remained silent. Until you. Isolde wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. What does that mean for me? It means, he said quietly, that there are those who would kill you for what you are, and others who would use you. And you? She forced herself to meet his gaze. What will you do with me? King Thaddeus was silent for a long moment. Then he crossed the room, moving with that unnatural, predatory grace, and stopped directly in front of her. I will keep you safe, he said, whether you wish it or not. Why? Because you are mine. The word sent a jolt through her chest. Not possession. Something deeper. Something that hummed in her blood like a second heartbeat. The bond has already begun, he continued, his voice dropping. The moment the stone recognized you, it tied your life to mine. If you die, the bloodline ends. If I die, he paused. The protection ends. So I'm a prisoner. You are a queen. The words hung in the air between them. I never wanted to be a queen, Isolde said softly, and I never wanted to be a king. His mouth curved in something that was not quite a smile. We rarely receive what we want. He lifted his hand then, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, his fingers brushed her cheek. Cold, gentle, impossibly careful. You are afraid of me, he murmured. Yes. Good. You should be. But his touch remained tender. I have lived for 900 years, he said quietly. I have killed more men than I can count. I have ruled through blood and silence. And in all that time, I have never. He paused, as if the words were unfamiliar on his tongue. I have never felt what I feel when you are near. Isolde's breath caught. The stone does not lie, he continued. You were meant to stand at my side. Not as a servant, not as a trophy, but as my equal. I am not your equal. Not yet. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. But you will be. He stepped back, the absence of his touch like a wound. Sleep, he said. Tomorrow, your training begins. Training? If you are to survive this court, he said, his voice hardening, you must learn to be more than invisible. Chapter 5. Blood and Lessons. The training was not what Isolde expected. No weapons, no combat. Instead, King Thaddeus taught her the language of his world, the subtle hierarchies of the vampire court, the ancient laws that govern their kind, the deadly dance of politics and power. You do not survive here by strength alone, he told her one evening, his voice echoing through the empty council chamber. You survive by knowing when to speak, when to stay silent, when to show mercy and when to strike without hesitation. Isolde listened, her mind working to absorb every word. She had spent her life unnoticed, but now invisibility was no longer an option. The court watched her, whispered about her, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed contempt. They think I don't belong here, she said quietly. They are afraid of you, Thaddeus corrected. There is a difference. He stood at the head of the long table, maps spread before him. Even in stillness, he commanded the space, a king carved from shadow and cold authority. Your bloodline once held power over us, he continued. The first line could compel vampires, bind us, destroy us. That knowledge has not been forgotten. But I can't do any of that. Not yet. He moved around the table, closing the distance between them. Isolde's pulse quickened despite herself. The magic is dormant, he said, buried beneath layers of mortal ignorance. But it is there. The stone proves it. Then teach me. The words surprised even her. But as soon as she spoke them, she knew they were true. If she was to survive in this world, if she was to be more than a pawn, she needed to understand what she was. Something flickered in Thaddeus's eyes. Approval, or perhaps hunger. Very well, he said softly, but the first lesson will cost you. Cost me what? He extended his hand, palm up, an offering, a challenge. Your blood. Isolde's heart stuttered. Why? Because blood is the key to your magic, and to our bond. His gaze held hers, unflinching. If you wish to learn, you must trust me. She stared at his hand, at the long, pale fingers that could crush stone, at the veins visible beneath his skin, dark and still. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. He produced a small silver blade from his coat, the edge gleaming in the candlelight. Without ceremony, he drew it across her palm, a shallow cut, precise and swift. Blood welled, bright red against her pale skin. Thaddeus's eyes darkened, his pupils dilated, and for the first time, she saw the creature beneath the king, the predator, the hunger. But he did not move. Focus, he commanded, his voice rough. Feel the warmth of your blood, the life in it, the magic. Isolde closed her eyes, trying to obey. At first, she felt nothing, only the sting of the cut, the trickle of blood down her wrist. Then, slowly, something else stirred. A heat, a pulse, like a second heartbeat, distant and faint, buried deep within her chest. There, Thaddeus murmured. Do you feel it? Yes, she breathed. That is your power, your birthright. His hand tightened around hers, and it is mine to protect. She opened her eyes. He was closer now. Close enough that she could see the faint silver threads in his irises. Close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from his body like winter fog. You will learn to wield it, he said quietly. And when you do, no one in this court will dare question your place at my side. His thumb brushed over the cut on her palm, and the wound closed, sealed, as if it had never been. Isolde stared at her unblemished skin, stunned. How? My blood, he said simply. It heals. It binds. It claims. She looked up at him, her breath shallow. Is that what you want? She whispered. To claim me? Thaddeus's expression was unreadable, but his hand remained wrapped around hers, cold and unyielding. What I want, he said softly, is irrelevant. But his eyes told a different story. Chapter 6. The Court's Judgment. The summons came at dawn. A formal gathering of the Vampire Council. All high-ranking members of the coven assembled to pass judgment on the king's unusual choice of consort. Isolde dressed in the gown they had sent her, deep burgundy velvet, high-necked and long-sleeved, elegant but severe. She looked like a queen, felt like a fraud. Thaddeus met her outside the throne room. He wore full ceremonial armor, black steel etched with silver runes, a cloak that swept the floor like pooled ink. He looked every inch the warlord king. Stay beside me, he said quietly. Do not speak unless I give you leave, and do not show fear. I'm terrified. Good. His hand brushed the small of her back, brief, grounding. Fear will keep you sharp. The doors opened. The council chamber was filled. Dozens of vampires, ancient and beautiful and deadly, their eyes fixed on her with cold calculation. Isolde forced herself to walk steadily, her chin lifted, her hands clasped in front of her. Thaddeus took his place at the head of the chamber. Isolde stood at his right, exactly one step behind, the position of a consort, not a servant. Lord Valerian, the eldest of the council, rose from his seat. His hair was silver, his face lined with age even immortality could not fully erase. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice dripping with false courtesy. "We gather today to address concerns regarding your chosen bride." "State them," Thaddeus said flatly. "She is mortal, untrained, of no noble blood." Valerian's gaze flicked to Isolde, dismissive. "Surely you see the insult this presents to our kind?" "I see no insult, only cowardice." The chamber went silent. Valerian's expression hardened. "Cowardice, my lord? You fear her?" Thaddeus's voice was ice and iron. "You fear what her bloodline represents, and so you hide behind tradition and pretense." "She carries the blood of the first line," another council member spat. "The witches who sought to destroy us." "The witches who created us," Thaddeus corrected, "and whose power has long since faded into myth. What threat does one untrained girl pose to a coven of immortals?" "Then why keep her?" Valerian challenged. "If she is no threat, she is no use." Thaddeus stood. The movement was slow, deliberate, and every vampire in the room stiffened. "She is mine," he said, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet, "and that is reason enough." "With respect, Your Majesty." "You have no respect." Thaddeus descended from the dais, his massive form cutting through the space like a blade. "You have fear, and envy, and ambition poorly concealed." He stopped before Valerian, towering over the elder vampire. "If any among you believe you have a claim to question my choices," Thaddeus said softly, "step forward now. Challenge me. Let us settle this in the old way." No one moved. "I thought not." He turned, his gaze sweeping the assembly. "Isolde is my consort. She will be treated as such. Any who harm her, threaten her, or speak against her will answer to me personally." His eyes glinted silver in the torchlight. "And I promise you, my mercy has limits." Silence. Then, one by one, the council members bowed their heads. Valerian was the last. His jaw tight, his eyes burning with resentment. But he bowed. "As you command, Your Majesty." Isolde's hands did not stop shaking until they were back in the king's private study. "You made enemies today," she said quietly. "I have had enemies for centuries." Thaddeus poured himself a glass of dark liquid. Blood, she realized, her stomach twisting. "A few more will not trouble me. They hate me." "Yes. And you don't care." He looked at her then, his expression softening, just slightly. "I care," he said. More than is wise. Chapter 7. The First Touch. The bond grew stronger with every passing night. Isolde felt it in the way her heartbeat seemed to sync with his presence, the way she could sense him in the castle, even when he was not near. The way her dreams were no longer her own, filled with his memories, his battles, his centuries of solitude. And he felt her too. She knew it by the way he watched her, the way his stillness became something almost tender. One evening, after another grueling lesson in court politics, Isolde found him in the library. He sat by the fire, reading as he often did, his expression distant. She hesitated in the doorway. "Come," he said without looking up. She crossed the room, settling into the chair opposite him. For a long moment they sat in comfortable silence. "Do you regret it?" she asked finally. "Regret what?" "Choosing me." He set the book aside, his silver eyes finding hers. "No." "Even though I've brought you nothing but trouble?" "Trouble," he murmured, "is not always unwelcome." He rose from his chair, moving to stand before her. Isolde's pulse quickened. He knelt, so that their eyes were level. "You are the first person in 300 years," he said quietly, who has looked at me and seen something other than a monster. You are a monster. Yes. His mouth curved in the faintest smile. But you do not fear me as you should. I do fear you. No. His hand lifted, hovering near her face. You fear what you feel for me. Isolde's breath caught. I don't... Liar. The word was soft, almost affectionate. His fingers brushed her cheek, cold and impossibly gentle. I have lived centuries without touch, he murmured. Without warmth, without wanting anything beyond power and silence. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. And then, you arrived. Fragile, mortal, terrified, and suddenly I find myself wanting things I have no right to. What things? She whispered. His gaze dropped to her mouth. You! The world seemed to stop. I should not, he continued, his voice rough. You are mortal, breakable, and I am... A king, Isolde finished. A vampire, a creature of darkness. She leaned forward, just slightly. I know what you are. And still you do not run? No. His hand cupped her face fully now, cold palm against warm skin. If I kiss you, he said softly, there will be no going back. The bond will deepen. You will be mine in truth, and I will be yours. Do you understand? Yes. And still you consent? Yes. He closed the distance between them. The kiss was nothing like she had imagined, not brutal or demanding, but slow, reverent. His mouth was cold against hers, his lips impossibly soft. He kissed her as if she were something precious, something sacred. And when he pulled back, his eyes had darkened to storm gray. Mine, he breathed. Isolde's heart thundered in her chest. Yours, she whispered back. Chapter 8. The Hunter's Arrival. The attack came 3 nights later. Isolde woke to the sound of screaming. She bolted upright, her heart slamming against her ribs, and ran to the window. The courtyard below was ablaze. Figures moved through the smoke. Humans, armored and armed with silver weapons. Vampire hunters. Her door burst open. A guard, pale and bloodied, staggered inside. My lady, you must come with me, now. What's happening? Hunters. They've breached the outer wall. The king has ordered you brought to the vaults. An arrow shattered the window. The guard crumpled, a silver bolt through his throat. Isolde screamed. A man vaulted through the broken window, landing in a crouch. He wore leather armor etched with holy symbols, his face hidden behind a steel mask. The witchblood, he said, his voice muffled. You're coming with us. Isolde backed toward the door. I'm not... He lunged. She threw herself aside, stumbling over the fallen guard. The hunter grabbed her arm, wrenching her upright. And then he was gone. Thaddeus stood in his place, holding the hunter by the throat. The king's eyes blazed silver, his fangs bared, and for the first time, Isolde saw him as the council did. A monster. He crushed the hunter's windpipe without a sound. The body hit the floor. Thaddeus turned to her, blood on his hands, his expression wild. Are you hurt? No, He crossed the room in 2 strides, his hands framing her face, his gaze scanning her frantically. If he had touched you, if they had taken you. I'm fine, she whispered. I'm here. He pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her like iron bands. She felt his heart, still, silent, dead. But his grip was fierce, desperate. They came for you, he said into her hair. They know what you are. How? Valerian. The name was a snarl. He sent word to the hunter guilds. He means to use them to remove you. Isolde pulled back, staring up at him. Then send me away. Let me go. I'm not worth... You are worth everything. The words were raw, broken. I will burn this kingdom to ash before I let them take you. The battle raged until dawn. When the smoke cleared, 30 hunters lay dead. The outer wall was scorched and broken, and Lord Valerian knelt in the throne room in chains. Thaddeus stood over him, his face a mask of cold fury. "You betrayed your king." "I protected our kind," Valerian spat. "She is a poison. She is my queen." Thaddeus's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "And you will beg her forgiveness, or you will die." Valerian looked at Isolde, his eyes burning with hatred. She stepped forward, her voice steady. "I forgive you," she said quietly. Valerian blinked, shocked. "But if you threaten me again," she continued, her gaze hardening, "I will not be so merciful." Thaddeus smiled. A slow, dangerous curve of his mouth. "Take him to the dungeons," he ordered. "Let him consider his choices." Chapter 9. The Blood Covenant. In the aftermath of the attack, Thaddeus made his intentions clear: a formal blood covenant, the ancient ritual that bound vampire and consort in unbreakable union. "It will tie your life to mine," he explained in the quiet of his chambers. "You will age slower, heal faster, and no one will be able to harm you without suffering my wrath." "And you?" Isolde asked. "What do you gain?" "You." His hand cupped her cheek. "For as long as you live." The ceremony was held in the Coven's sacred chamber, deep beneath the castle. The walls were carved with runes older than memory. Candles burned in a circle around the stone altar. Only the most trusted members of the court attended. Thaddeus wore ceremonial robes of black and silver. Isolde wore white, a bride in truth now. The high priestess, an ancient vampire with eyes like black glass, began the chant. Thaddeus took Isolde's hand, lifting it between them. With a silver blade, he cut his palm, then hers. Their blood mingled, dripping onto the stone. "I bind my life to yours," he said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "I vow to protect you, to honor you, to stand beside you until the world ends." The priestess turned to Isolde. "Speak your vow." Isolde's voice trembled, but she did not falter. "I bind my life to yours. I vow to stand with you, to trust you, to be your equal in all things." The priestess pressed their joined hands together. "By blood and vow you are one. Let no force sever this bond." Light flared, red and silver, blinding and warm. Isolde gasped as power surged through her, into her, filling every vein with liquid fire. When it faded, she was on her knees. Thaddeus knelt beside her, his arms steadying her. "Breathe," he murmured. She did. And for the first time, she felt it. The bond, solid and unbreakable, thrumming between them like a living thing. She looked up at him and saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. "I feel you," she whispered. "And I you." He helped her to her feet, his hand never leaving hers. The court bowed as they passed. For the first time, Isolde did not feel like an imposter. She felt like a queen. Chapter 10. The Blood Queen's Awakening. The bond changed everything. Isolde could feel Thaddeus now, his presence a constant hum beneath her skin. His emotions, muted but real. His thoughts, distant but accessible. And her magic, dormant for so long, began to stir. The bloodstone pulsed against her chest. Thaddeus had given it to her after the ceremony, a symbol of her place. "It belongs to you now," he had said. "As I do." She stood in the training yard, alone in the moonlight, the stone warm against her skin. She closed her eyes, focusing on the pulse within her, the magic her ancestors had wielded. "Reach for it," Thaddeus's voice whispered through the bond. "Do not fear it." She exhaled slowly, reached inward, and felt it. Power. Old and vast and terrifying. It rose through her like a flood, and suddenly the world snapped into focus. She could feel the life around her, the guards on the walls, the servants in the castle, the ancient forest beyond, and more. She could feel him. Thaddeus, standing on the battlements above, watching her. She opened her eyes. The stone blazed crimson. "Well done," Thaddeus said, appearing beside her in a blur of movement. He looked at her with something like awe. "You are stronger than I imagined. I don't know how to control it. You will learn." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "And I will be with you every step." She looked up at him. This ancient king who had chosen her, protected her, bound himself to her. "I love you," she said. The words were simple, undeniable. Thaddeus stilled. For a long moment he did not speak. Then, slowly, he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I have waited 900 years, he murmured, to hear those words. And I never thought I would. But you do now." "Yes." He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I do." "Then say it." His lips curved in the faintest smile. "I love you, Isolde. My queen, my equal, my salvation." She kissed him, and this time, the bond between them blazed like the sun. Chapter 11. Eternal Covenant. Spring came to the northern kingdom, and with it, whispers. Isolde no longer walked the halls as a maid or a frightened girl. She walked as a queen, the bloodstone at her throat, power thrumming beneath her skin. The court bowed to her now, feared her, respected her. But there was one final test. The Coven's law required an heir, not a child. Vampires could not bear them, but a successor. One who carried the blood of both mortal and immortal. One who could inherit the throne when Thaddeus's reign ended. And for that, there was only one path. Isolde stood in their private chamber, her hands resting on the stone windowsill. Thaddeus stood behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "You know what they will ask," he murmured. "Yes." "And you know what it means?" "Yes." He turned her to face him, his expression grave. "If you take my blood, if you bind yourself to me fully, you will no longer be mortal. Not vampire, but something between. You will live for centuries, and you will never be able to return to the world you knew." "I don't want that world," Isolde said quietly. "I want this one. With you." Thaddeus closed his eyes as if her words caused him pain. "I do not deserve you." "You're right." She smiled faintly. "But you're stuck with me anyway." He laughed. A low, rough sound she had never heard before. "Then let us make it official." The ritual was private this time. No court, no witnesses. Only the two of them, in the sacred chamber beneath the castle. Thaddeus cut his wrist, dark blood welling. He offered it to her. "Drink," he said softly, "and become mine in truth." Isolde hesitated only a heartbeat. Then she took his wrist, brought it to her lips, and drank. The blood was cold, metallic. And yet beneath it, she tasted something else. Him, his strength, his sorrow, his love. Power flooded through her, greater than before. Her body burned, then froze, then burned again. She gasped, pulling away, and Thaddeus caught her as her knees buckled. "I have you," he whispered. "I have you." The transformation lasted 3 days. When Isolde woke, the world was different. Sharper, brighter. She could hear the heartbeat of a mouse in the walls. Smell the rain 5 miles away. And when she looked at Thaddeus, she saw him not as a monster, but as her equal. Her partner. Her king. "How do you feel?" he asked, brushing hair from her face. "Alive," she said. "More alive than I've ever been." He smiled, truly smiled, and kissed her. Months later, the coven received the announcement. Queen Isolde of the Northern Kingdom was with child. Not a vampire child, not a mortal child, but something entirely new. A hybrid. The first of its kind. The court was stunned. The council divided. But Thaddeus stood before them all, Isolde at his side, and spoke with absolute authority. "This child will be our future, and any who threaten them will face me." No one dared object. When the baby was born, a girl with Isolde's eyes and Thaddeus's dark hair, the king held her as if she were made of glass. "What shall we name her?" Isolde asked, exhausted but radiant. Thaddeus looked down at the tiny, perfect face, at the child who should not exist. The miracle born of blood and love and impossible choices. "Seraphine," he said softly. "Light in the darkness." Isolde smiled. "Perfect." Thaddeus looked at her then. This mortal girl who had become a queen, who had defied a kingdom, who had given him something he thought lost forever. Hope. "Say the baby is mine," he had once commanded. But now, holding his daughter, his wife at his side, he knew the truth. They were both his, and he was theirs. Forever.